But our series for this week is God is in control. All right? It cannot be against whatever is in that program. God is in control. God is in charge. Now this is an assertion. This is a statement of fact, I think. But we, during the week, will have to give evidence for that. We can't just make statements if we're just throwing slogans. I mean, God is in control. I just lost my nephew in a car accident, and you say God is in control. I just failed an interview. God is in, I didn't say you are in control. Thank you very much. Let me welcome you to our week of prayer. Invite your friends, unless you have a problem with what's going to be said here. But if you think it's good, invite somebody else. Is that okay? Yeah, try and do that. But if not, you can invite yourself and come here. It is encouraging to see so many of you on a Sunday. I promise you, if I was not preaching, I wouldn't be here. So it's good. I'm being honest. It's good to see you. I really don't take your presence here for granted. Sunday is busy with all kinds of activities. Tomorrow is a busy day, and you wish you could be sitting there and relaxing. Then your program is interrupted, and you come here only to discover later on that you're going to be disrupted also here because of you don't even know what the message is going to be like. You may not like it. It may make you angry because we're not here to entertain you. So you take the risk and say, well, I'll go. I'll see what happens. But we hope that you will enjoy the meetings that we're going to be having here this week. I'm going to read a text, and then we will pray, and then we will reflect on the text and other things that surround the text. I'm looking at Daniel chapter 4. Our main text is found in Daniel chapter 4, which, by the way, we will be reflecting on this text for the duration of this week. All right, so we will be commenting and looking to the text and reflecting on the text, and I'll be explaining that later on until Sabbath. So if you miss it tomorrow, you know we're going to talk about it again on Tuesday, so you can come on Tuesday. You won't miss much. Where do I start? Let's read the end of the text, and then we'll explain the rest when we look at the text again. Daniel chapter 4, I'm going to read from verse 24. This is at the end of the passage. We'll come back to the passage just to explain what is happening to those of us who may have forgotten. But let's just read the last part, because our focus really is going to be right there in that segment of the passage I'm going to read to you. Am I audible? Getting an echo here. This is the interpretation, O King, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my Lord the King. This is an interpretation of the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. All right, here it comes. They shall drive you from men, your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it, that is the kingdom of men, to whomsoever he chooses. 26. And inasmuch as they gave the command to leave the stump, that is part of the dream that he saw, and the rest of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured to you after you come to know that heaven rules. So it's just a repetition of what he said earlier on in verse 25. Now 27, which is very important also for our deliberations this week. Therefore, O King, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. And the good Lord bless the reading of his word now and forevermore. Amen. Our series for this week now, I don't know, I don't know what's in the program. I remember seeing the program, but I can't remember exactly what's in the program. But our series for this week is God is in control. All right, it cannot be against whatever is in that program. God is in control. God is in charge. Now, this is an assertion. This is a statement of fact, I think. But we, during the week, will have to give evidence for that. We can't just make statements if we are just throwing slogans. I mean, God is in control. I just lost my nephew in a car accident, and you say God is in control. I just failed an interview. God is in, I didn't say you are in control. God is in control. And when we say that, we will show also that He's not a control freak. He is in control. Control freaks are not in control. God is not a control freak. He is in control to the extent that He can allow you to do what you want to do. That's how in control He is. That's what we're going to be looking at. And if I forget to do that, remind me. But this today, our topic for today, what we want to focus on today, this evening, is the certainty of the advent, is the certainty of the coming of Christ. And I'm raising that as a foundation of everything we're going to say this week. And I'm going to say that again. If Christ's coming is not certain, anything that we're going to say this week can never be certain. Do you want me to say this again? Differently. If the coming of Christ is not certain, the whole Bible is in question. It's a serious question on the very Bible. You see, the Bible in the second coming, the cross of Christ, and everything that you find in the Bible makes sense only if Christ is coming. If Christ is not coming, we don't need the Bible. What are we going to do with the Bible if Christ is not going to come? The reason we have the Bible is so that we can learn about this Christ who is coming and be prepared and be ready for Him. That's it. The reason why Christ came to die on the cross is because Christ is going to come again. Christ is not coming again because He died on the cross. He died on the cross because He's coming again. It was His second coming that made Him to go to the cross. He didn't go to the cross and decided, you know what, now that I've died on the cross, I might as well come again. It was His coming that propelled Him to die on the cross, because if He was not going to come, there would have been no point for Him to die on the cross. And dying on the cross, if He's not coming, would be a waste of time. And what we want to emphasize this evening, beloved, is that the coming of Christ is more certain than your plans for tomorrow. You see, your plans for tomorrow depend on many things. One of those is that you'll be alive tomorrow. And we are not sure. I know you are sure. And that's fine. We're not going to argue with you. We are sure that you'll be alive. Because even when you are dead, you want to know that you were wrong. Because you want to know that you are dead. So it's pointless to argue about whether you'll be there tomorrow or not. Because when you are dead, you can't wake up and say, you see, we told you. There are so many things that may go wrong in your plans. But the coming of Christ, there is nothing in this world that can prevent the coming of Christ. It's unfortunate that churches have forgotten that Christ is coming again. But churches continue even though Christ is not coming again. But they've got a different agenda. You see, when Christ is not coming again, you make sure that this world becomes the world you were looking for. So religion today has become a place where you gain money, a place where if you are not falling pregnant, then you come to a church, our pastor will pray for you and you'll be pregnant. If you're not getting a wife or husband, come to a church. I mean, honestly, do you think church exists for that? If you are sick, come to a church. Go to the hospital. Do you think we exist for that? I'm not saying we shouldn't pray for you to be healed, but honestly, you will be healed. But the fact that you are healed does not guarantee that you're not going to die. Even those who were healed during the time of Christ died at some point. So, I mean, this whole healing thing is temporal. So there's no way we can exist for something that is temporal. So in other words, even those who are healed one day will die. Even if we resurrect you like Lazarus, he died later on. So we have to live for something beyond succeeding in your interview or having money, then you die after that. This thing called the Advent, that's the heart, that's the reason, that's the mainstay, that's the main reason, that's the pillar of Christian faith. Like I say, it has been sidestepped and taken off from the discussion in many churches, including some of our churches. So we're going to talk about that, the certainty of the advent of Christ. But if you look at this text as a way of introduction, chapter 4, we'll again come back to the chapter, but as a way of introducing chapter 4, this part that I've just read, and many other texts, of course, addresses in a way of the three major questions. Others think there are four, others think there are five, doesn't matter. But the life's greatest questions: where do I come from? At some point, if you're not a cow, you need to ask that question. That is, if you're not an animal, if you exist as a human being, you want to know. I mean, kids at a very early age, Mommy, where do I come from? When this question it's a relevant question to a human. Where do I come from? And the mother says, the aeroplane brought you. At least that's what our mothers told us. Now we have to tell you that you were in the belly. We couldn't say that, and you are in mommy's belly and this and that. You know, we are afraid to say that. So we used to. So you have answered that question. Your child wants to know, where do I come from? But later on, it gets into another question. What am I doing here? What's the purpose? Why are we living? Why are you here? I mean, not here. I mean, why here on earth? I mean, what's the whole thing? And you've got to answer that question, because how you live is informed by why you think you are here. Of course, linked to that, if you believe there's a purpose for your life, and then if you believe there's a purpose for your life, then there must be an intelligent being that's the reason for that. Because you can't have purpose from chaos. If this mic was created or made so that it can amplify the voice, so that's the purpose of the mic, but the purpose of this mic actually reflects the idea that was once in the mind of somebody who invented or who created or manufactured this mic. So this mic is a reflection of the idea that was in somebody's mind. So the purpose exists before the entity. You first have a purpose, and then you create something that's going to be linked to that purpose. So there's the question, where do I come from? Why am I here? And the last one is, what's the destiny? Where is it? Where is this thing going to end? How is it going to end? You want to think about your end. You want to think about your destiny. Of course, somewhere others would put the question of morality. How do I live? Is it right? Is this wrong? Is this evil? Is this good? You've got to know that. But for me, that question is subsumed. It is implied in the question of purpose. Once you discover that, then there are certain things you cannot do. Otherwise, they will militate against your purpose. Unless your purpose is to kill others, then that's fine. But if your purpose, you discover your purpose, part of that purpose would be, I need to preserve this life. And hopefully your purpose will not be to kill everyone. Maybe that's why we need to have another element that deals with morality. And there are some people who believe that morality is what you feel like. You don't need an external objective morality. Morality is subjective. I mean, honestly, do you really believe that? Do you really want to tell me that you want to use your feeling as a determining factor when it comes to morality? Then you are in trouble, because, I mean, honestly, if you feel like you want to kill me, I'm in trouble. And that's morality for you. Morality is something that should be outside, that governs your behavior. Whether you like it or not, this is what you should do. And if you don't do this, we're not going to be happy. And that morality cannot actually be the product of the very same person who must live by it. I mean, that's the whole argument of morality. If I produce morality, I can change it. If killing is wrong, it has to be wrong right through. But if I say killing is wrong, I can say killing is right tomorrow. So once you talk about morality, and I must be governed by those moral principles, then those moral principles cannot be the product of my reasoning. They can't. It throws us back to somebody who's supposed to have been the cause, who's supposed to be the intelligent, who's supposed to be the creator of all that which we see. And ultimately, of course, we need to talk about our demise. And that's it. Creatures that we are have to think about our end. That's why people are drinking. They are afraid to think about how life will end. You use drugs all when you think I'm going to live forever. We used to have a saying in Cape Town when we were growing up, that Scotch never dies, he dies by mistake. You know what? All of the Scotches I know died, but then there was this subtext that says they died by mistake, but they died. So all we know, it doesn't matter how skeptical you can be, it doesn't matter how rebellious you want to be, we all know we're going to die. It's going to end. But if life is going to come to an end, then that forces you again to ask the question, but why was I living if this comes to an end? Now, if life was not meant to end, it will be pointless to ask that question. But because life comes to an end, you want to know, but why am I living? If this is going to come to an end, but why am I here now? It's like there's an assignment, and I've got to do this before my time runs out. So the fact that I'm going to die, and maybe that's the reason why the preacher in Ecclesiastes says it is better to go to the house of mourning, of grieving, to a house where somebody is dead. It's better to attend a funeral than to go to a house where there's partying. Because the funeral reminds you that you're going to die also. And the question of knowing, this whole idea of knowing that you're going to die, forces you to think about life. Is it not Moses who says, you have given us 70 or 80 years, teach us to number our days in Psalms 90, 10 to 12, teach us to number our days so that we can apply our hearts to wisdom. When you know the brevity of life, it challenges you or forces you to think about life. You people who don't think about life think that they think they're going to live forever. One of the reasons why young people will not think about life, it is because they know that even 40 years from now we'll still be here. What's the hurry? But when life is about to end, when you are in a hospital, when the doctor says you've got 3 months, then you begin to say, but why was I here to begin with? And those questions must be answered for us to be able to find meaning to life. So it's where do I come from, and the purpose, and with the purpose we attach meaning, of course. And coming back to purpose, it hits you hard when you go through pain. Pain can destroy you if you don't know why you are here. Because then that whole pain is a waste of time. When Paul would say in Romans, said, all things work out for good to those who have embraced God's love, to those who are called by God. All things work out. It's like there's a purpose. It's like there's a purpose. Like even this pain is going to bring me closer to why I'm here. Then you can be able to endure pain. Now, I believe that those 4 questions or 3 are somehow addressed in this short. That's why we need to look at that. And so we hope by the end of the week we would have challenged, as I read somewhere, would have challenged our young people that are here and our not so young people that are here, our critical thinkers that are here, to be devout believers, to be passionate believers. We want our thinkers, to challenge our thinkers to be believers. Don't make thinking to be an enemy of believing. And we want our believers to think. And the problem with too many believers who don't think, I just believe. You see, the whole thing is magical. I just believe. I can hear Christ inside of me. That's not enough. When you are faced with challenges, you must be able to answer. You must be able to defend. And is it Peter who says, you must be able to give the reason for the faith? That is, reason for the faith. The reason for the faith cannot be faith. Because the reason for my faith is faith. No. Give us the reason for your faith. Give us something that will help us understand your faith. And of course, whatever answer you give, as you will see as we go through starting today, whatever answer you give to these 4 questions, because people have come, philosophers, theologians, scientists, atheists, theists, Christians, non-Christians, Muslims, whatever. People have sought to answer those questions. The fact that you have answered the question doesn't mean it's right. But it's good that you answered it. But it doesn't mean it's right. But how do you know that your answer, the answer you give to these questions is correct? You see, religion comes in now, and there are all kinds of religions, and they're all trying to answer these questions. But how do you know that yours is right, is correct? No, whatever answer you give, as long as you believe in it, is right. No, we cannot do that. 1 + 1 must be 2, even in Russia. If it's true, it must be true everywhere. We don't believe in relativism. No, it depends. If it's true to you, it's true to you. It doesn't work. I don't know how many of you have read or listened to Ravi Zacharias. He's very fond of mentioning the 3 litmus tests for any truth statement or assertion. He says it must be logically consistent. It must be empirically adequate. It must also be existentially relevant. And we look at that. So it must, logically. That's when you say reason for your faith logically. Don't just say, this thing I call logic. No. There's no logic here. When you hear me speaking a language you don't understand, then you must know I'm speaking in tongues. There has to be logic. I should be able to follow. I should be able to follow from A, B. If A is equal to B and B is equal to A, or if A is equal to C and B is equal to A, then B must also be equal to C. You can't change that. That's because you are a Christian. It can't. Then the logic breaks. If A is equal to C and B is equal to A, then B must be equal to C. If I see that B is not equal to C, then there's something wrong with that structure. There has to be logic. Nothing wrong with that. The question we want to ask, does faith statements also fall within logic? To a great extent, yes. And empirical adequate. In other words, you should be able to check and give evidence. And not only that, when you have done that, then whatever truth you hold that you have just shown and showed evidence for must be existentially relevant. In other words, if you say to me, Christ is coming, and I can prove it to you, after a fruit, then I say, so what? In other words, what does it mean? So what? What's the relevance of that? So a truthful assertion and affirmation, especially when it deals with life's greatest question, it must be existentially relevant. It must be good. Father Christmas is a good concept, but it is untrue. So if second coming of Christ can be shown to be certain, we must also show that it is a good thing. If God exists, we must also show that it's a good thing that God exists. Do you know one of the main arguments that atheists raise, they raise quite a few, but one of the main ones is that they have a problem with the character of God, so they destroy him. In other words, if God were to exist, we would have a problem with him. So let's find reasons why he should not exist. If we argue and we all agree that, you know what, if God were to exist, it would be a wonderful thing. But it's just that it does not exist. Then it's not that bad. But when you get to a point, even if you were to exist, that would be a nightmare. There are people who have a problem with heaven because the very concept of heaven is just a bad thing. It's bad. Of course, you can't say that because you're afraid lest you don't go there. Because it's better to go to heaven than to go to hell. You see, once you compare heaven and hell, then heaven is okay. But it doesn't mean if there was another option, heaven will still win. Now, if people go to heaven because hell is bad, then you can be sure that there are many people who are going to be in heaven. But they'll say, but we had no choice, because there's no choice between heaven and hell. You can't choose. So you just say, let's just go to heaven. It's better to be bored in heaven than to burn in hell. And that's going to be a boring eternity. Is the whole idea of heaven good? Is it true? We can show it's true. But is it good? It can be so good. Then we say, but we don't have evidence for it. But if you could find the evidence, it would be nice. You know, when you see how good it is, And sometimes I say, even if there's no evidence, I don't care. I'm just going for it. But that's dangerous. Then you're going to be believing in Father Christmas. There's one statement for me that sums everything I've just said. And that statement is, the just shall live by faith. Can I say that again? You can find it in Habakkuk 2, but I like it of course, in Hebrews 10, 37 to 39, towards the end of Hebrews 10. It says, then the just shall live by faith. I'm not going to get into that in the context, but the just shall live by faith. In other words, the just shall live. There's existential relevance. The just shall not escape life by faith. They shall live. So the just are not just going to ignore reality, they shall live. So when the just are faced with challenges, they're going to leave. They not leave like go, disappear. They're going to leave. You see, the just will not commit suicide and run away from reality. They're going to leave. The just are not going to drink alcohol or use drugs to run away from reality. They're going to leave. In other words, the just have actually embraced what we have just termed existential relevance. That there is relevance, there is something good even though I'm going through pain. The just shall live by faith, which means faith enables us to live. When you lose your loved one, faith must make you live. It must sustain you. You see, faith can never be a drug. It must be something that makes you to move, even when there's no reason to move. Faith. By the way, I believe that there's no other way of living except to live by faith. I mean, honestly, if you live by sight, you're not living. If you live by what you have, by what you see, you're not living. If you are sustained by what you see, then you are not sustained. If you depend on something that is passing, like this thing is passing and you depend on it, what does that mean? You'll pass with it. So that's not living. Now, to live by faith is to live, is, as Paul would put it, is not to walk by sight. Is to be sustained by that which you cannot see, which you cannot touch. But it has always been there. When you were not there, it was there. When you'll be gone, it will be there. If that sustains you, if you want to be strong in life and be stable, you must stand on something that cannot be moved. So to live by faith is to do that. By the way, later on he says, I know you have a problem with faith. He says, but faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. In other words, faith. This is hope that Christ is coming. But faith is the foundation of that hope. And that faith is the evidence. Faith actually makes you to see that what you are hoping for is actually true. Faith, when you use the word faith, it means this thing is certain, it is true once you put faith. That's why you can say faith, and Ellen White says, we have never been called to believe. God can never call you to believe without giving you evidence. And not just evidence, sufficient evidence. You know, people who don't believe, ultimately, like until the end, it's not because there was no evidence. We call them rebels. There was evidence, they just said, no, yeah, I can see it, but never. Don't confuse me with facts. So to live by faith is to live. And faith is the substance of that which is unseen. The evidence of that. In other words, if you say, I see there's something that's coming, then I must say, hey, how did you? And then I said, I know that by faith. Then he says, come. I said, no, I've got evidence for what I don't see. Let's look at the evidence. And we're going to do that shortly, just now. Okay, so let's come back now to our text and see how it's going to be answering some of these questions. Now, this is a beautiful part in the book of Daniel. Actually, I am inclined, and some of you are students of prophecy here, but let me challenge you. And I'm saying, I know we may disagree with me, but I want to believe that this part of the book of Daniel actually is the center of not only the book of Daniel, but also the book of Revelation. I've been thinking about this, I've been reflecting on this, and I can't come to any conclusion besides that it actually brings everything together, this part. Now, basically, two elements here. Now, before we get to that, you see this whole chapter It starts in chapter 4. Oh, that's obvious. Now, verse 1 to 3 says, to all peoples, nations, and languages. This comes from Nebuchadnezzar. Peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. So I'm going to declare. And how great are his signs, and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His dominion is from generation to generation. So he starts with what he ends with. But in between, he's telling us how he ended. And then he ends. In other words, when chapter 4 was written, when Nebuchadnezzar was writing chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar had already gone through chapter 4. So he says, now you see me here, let me go back and tell you. That how that happened. And you know how it happened? It is because all those 4 questions were answered for Nebuchadnezzar. All of them. And it tells us how those questions were answered. And God gives him a dream. He gave him one dream in Daniel chapter 2. We'll go back to that one later. He gives him a dream in chapter 4. He says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I was good. There was nothing wrong with me. When some people go to church and believe in God, but there's something wrong. Things were fine. I was doing okay. I did not believe in God because I want to have money. I had money. And that's simple. He says, don't think that I came to God because I was lacking something materially. He says, I was flourishing. Then I had this dream. His servants could not answer, could not help him with the dream. Called Daniel. Daniel gives the interpretation of the dream. He saw a tree, and there were birds in the tree, and the voices cut the tree, and the tree was cut. You can read the whole story of the dream, but I've just read the interpretation that that tree represents Nebuchadnezzar. And for 7 years, he's going to be eating grass like the beast of the field until he realizes, he acknowledges that God rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomsoever he chooses. That Nebuchadnezzar must actually accept there's enough evidence given. You must accept that God is in control, Nebuchadnezzar. There's enough evidence. If you don't do that, Nebuchadnezzar, then you cease to live like a human being. Because human beings must address those questions. When those questions are addressed, you must embrace the answers given to those questions. So there are 2 things. One, it is the assertion. It is the assertion that God is in charge. To Nebuchadnezzar. So when God reveals himself to Nebuchadnezzar, he doesn't say, Nebuchadnezzar, I'm a humble servant. There's no way Nebuchadnezzar would come to your God who's a humble servant. He doesn't say, I'm a humble servant. He doesn't say, Nebuchadnezzar, I'm going to send my son to die for you. Nebuchadnezzar will never understand a God who dies for his subjects. Because as far as Nebuchadnezzar is concerned, the subjects must die for their God. So God, there's no way God could approach Nebuchadnezzar. But Nebuchadnezzar will say, that's a weak God. Foolishness according to the Greeks, a stumbling block according to the Jews. So God says, I am the king, Nebuchadnezzar. I'm the king. So he's talking to the king. He says, I'm the king. I rule in your kingdom. Now you can't make that statement if you can't prove it. I rule in your kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar, and I've shown you that. Now, until you accept that, until you acknowledge, until you accept this undeniable fact that I rule, not in heaven. I mean, how can I know that you rule in heaven? Because I'm not there. I rule in your kingdom. That God rules, that God is in control. I've given you evidence. We're going to look at that just now. I've given you that evidence that I rule in the kingdom. Now, and then that's the assertion that God rules. And then, of course, then the second thing that he makes is the implication of that assertion. Because of the relevance, the existential relevance, the implication. If it is true that God rules, then what? Then begins life. If God rules, then I need to know what he wants from me. Then I need to know how I can live, because I'm going to be accountable to him, because he just told me that he removes kings. So why is he removing kings? Because they don't live according to his will. So I need to know his will. So once you accept that, then you are in the baptismal class. So, but do you know what's going to happen? If you know the implication, like Nebuchadnezzar did, because Nebuchadnezzar's problem was the implication, and I'm going to show you that Nebuchadnezzar had no doubt that God rules. And I'm going to show you just now in Daniel chapter 2. He had no doubt God had actually given him reasons for that, given him evidence for that. He had a problem with the existential relevance of an existing God. What does it mean for me? Now we will talk about that. We'll talk about that during the course of the week. But let me just give it to you because some of you may not be here next, or you only found time to be here now. Let me just quickly show you that Nebuchadnezzar's problem was not that God rules. And many people have no problem with the God who rules because they know there must be somebody who rules. But the problem is, what does it mean to be aligned to this God? That's where the problem is. And for Nebuchadnezzar, the implication was break off your sins. Stop living the way you want to live. Stop doing what you think is right. You must align your thinking with this God who rules. And that was bad. You know, some of us are Christians, which means we believe that Christ is coming. We believe that God rules. We believe that God is the king. But we are struggling with that. And sometimes we wish that was not true. Because sometimes the implications are so uncomfortable. So I mustn't do this. Why? You are a Christian. I mean, God rules. God is fine. But really, honestly, what's wrong with smoking? Because that's not your body. Okay. So I can't wear this. No, you can't. Because why? Because the one who created you says you mustn't wear that. It's not your body. You can't eat that. Why? Because it's not good. Then Paul says, whatever you eat or drink, whatever you do it for the glory of God, because he created you, he's one in charge, he rules. And that's why the problem is. That's why you come to church every day. You are trying to find power and reason to embrace the implication of accepting the assertion that God rules. But Nebuchadnezzar was honest. Some of us are not. Because you pretend as if you are Christians and you live here, you live as if you are not. But I mean, whom are you fooling? Fooling God? He rules. You can't fool him. Who are you fooling? Fooling us, fine. Then you are a fool. Because we don't care. Of course, there are others who care. Some of you are hypocrites. So what? You may be a hypocrite yourself. The fact that you are saying that doesn't mean you are not a hypocrite. I didn't say that. Nebuchadnezzar's issue was right there on that second part, and we're going to work on that second part for the rest of this week. If you look at his confession, towards the end there, he makes a lot of things, but there's something that just catches you. It says there, at the same time, my reason returned to me. That is, after 7 years, returned, and my glory and my kingdom, my honor and my splendor returned. And the nobles resorted to me. I was restored. So, in other words, back to where I was. Do you see what is happening? But there's something very interesting that he actually embraced, that he actually had, that he did not have. And he says, the last part, then in verse 36, it says, and excellent majesty was added. Now, all else was restored, returned, restored. But excellent majesty I did not have. It was added. And that's what we call existential relevance. This thing of embracing this concept of a God who rules actually added majesty. In other words, it's good. You know, people are afraid to live and to accept God's will because they think it's a problem. Have you ever wished, be honest with me now, I'm not talking to you, but I'm talking through you. Have you ever wished somewhere that I wish I did not know Christ this early? I mean, be honest, don't raise your hand. But have you ever wished, like, I wish I did not know. Maybe if I had known him like 50 years, when I'm 55, like I don't know. Look, I didn't know. But now I know, this thing started early. You know, it's like, I mean, you're going to church and you see your friends and say, "Ish, man, this thing, I just knew it very early. It's like a burden." I mean, have you ever thought that being a Christian is actually shortchanging you? You feel like I'm missing out. I've heard people say here during 11 o'clock service, not 11 o'clock, we can't say that, but during summer school here, he says, "Lord, we are here. Others are enjoying themselves." And he saw them when he was coming to church. Yeah, let them enjoy. Our time will come. That's the reason we don't grow in Christianity. It is because we think that we are being short-changed. We think that we are being disadvantaged. God says, "I have come." Christ says, "I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly." Abundantly. Nebuchadnezzar says, "This is the problem I had. I was okay with your God as powerful and majestic, but when now I must break off my sins, when now I must, before I do anything, consult him. I'm the king. My word is final. No, I must ask him. I can't accept that." Now Daniel says, God rules. If you accept that, this is an implication. You must break off your sins. He says, but if I do that, if I stop sinning, life is going to be boring. He says, then fine. Let's take you to the grass. Go eat grass then, see how life is going to be like. So he says, excellent majesty was added. I can promise you, Nebuchadnezzar wished he had actually embraced this God earlier on, because he was missing out all along. You know you have arrived. You know you have arrived in Christianity when you say, Lord, I wish I had given my life to you earlier. Then you know you're not going anywhere. I've seen people when things are tough, Eastern Suburbs, things are so tough here. You know, we thought we were coming to a church, but look at what I said. I might as well go back. You know, there are people still have options of going back. You see, for some of us, it doesn't matter how bad it can be. We're not going anywhere. It's worse there. Where we're coming from, we're not going there. I'm going back to my alcohol. I didn't know that Christians can gossip. Come on. So you still have your alcohol as an option. That if things go back, you'll go bad. You'll go. Come on. Of course, you're going there. You'll get there. Don't give up on yourself. You'll get there. It takes time, but you'll get there. You'll get used to the diet, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. All right. So those are the two things. We'll look at the other ones as we move. From now until Tuesday or so, we're going to be looking at the assertion, just to work on that assertion that God rules. All right, and then after that we look at the implication, and then we finish it on Sabbath. We'll wrap it up so those who could not come during the week and have a nice summary. Okay, let's just look at this one thing that. But you see, do you see that question, this statement addresses everything? God rules, he's the owner of life, he's the one who's always been existing. There's a purpose for your life, and there's morality, there's meaning, there's an end. All of that has been answered in that short statement. And if you read the whole book of Daniel, it just seeks to explain all of that, and you will see, we'll show that to you later on. Now, what evidence do we have in the Bible that God rules? At least for Nebuchadnezzar now. What was the evidence given to Nebuchadnezzar that God rules? Because it would appear that when God says, I rule, until you acknowledge that, then he must have been given evidence that God rules. So what evidence do we have in the Bible that God rules? Then you have to go back to Daniel chapter 2. You know, when God introduces himself to Nebuchadnezzar, he doesn't just say, Nebuchadnezzar, I rule. Accept this. If you don't, I'm going to kill you. He says, no, I'm going to walk with you step by step to show you that I rule. First of all, you are going to sleep, and I'm going to be in charge of your dream. Come on, guys. If I can get into your dreams, what else can you prevent me from? I mean, if I can get into your dreams, Do you think you can really mess up my ruling? Not only do I rule, but I even rule your dreams. In your dreams, I tell you what you should dream. I edit your dreams. I rule Nebuchadnezzar. I'm going to give you a dream. It's a Bible. Nebuchadnezzar slept and had a dream. But when you look at the story, that dream was God gave him the dream. Okay, so I've given you the dream, but let's do it this way, this time around. There was no need for him for God to make him forget the dream, the next one, because he had already showed him. So there was no, but the first one, he had to do that, because remember, he's giving him evidence. So he says, there's a dream, but you have forgotten the dream. And the reason why Nebuchadnezzar had to forget the dream, it is because when you don't know the dream, any interpretation can be fine. When you've forgotten the dream. So now he has forgotten the dream, but when you say this is the dream, he will remember. So then there were two things. You had to give him the dream, and he knows what he saw. Not only do that, then give me the interpretation. Then you can lie with the interpretation, that's fine. If you have the dream, the interpretation is nothing. And the guys came. He says, there's never been a king who has asked such a thing to his subjects. What you have asked from us, you can never get this from human beings like us, flesh and blood. This can only be asked from the gods who don't live among men. But Nebuchadnezzar's argument is you are supposed to be connected to those gods. I've trained you to have access to those gods. Can't you do that? Don't you have a formula to reach to those gods? He says, we can't. Then he says, I'm going to kill you. He didn't want to kill them. He was just trying to tell them how serious it is for him to know this dream. Are you with me? Because if I'm going to kill you and you are killed, that means honestly you don't know. So Daniel comes and he says, it is true. There's no one who knows this, but there's a God in heaven. So Daniel introduces God in this whole riddle, in this whole difficult assignment. Daniel introduces God. There's a God in heaven, and he's going to tell you what you saw in your dream. You know why? He's going to tell you. Of course, he doesn't say that, but of course, you know that's true. It's because he's the one who put that dream there. Here's your dream. You saw this and you saw that and you saw that's evidence. This is not magic. This is not just belief that God, he says, here it is. Is this true? He says, yeah, I saw that. Finish. God rules. Finish. So I'm going to give you the interpretation now. I'm going to give you the interpretation. Remember, beloved, Nebuchadnezzar never saw the fulfillment of the interpretation. We have further evidence of seeing it, but he did not. But what he saw was enough and sufficient. Nobody could interpret the dream. Nobody could tell me the dream. But this God somehow gave me the dream. Of course, you will see later on that even with the whole fire thing. We'll come back to that one tomorrow. So, you've got the statue of Daniel chapter 2. You know the story better than I do. The head of what? Of gold. And the chest of what? And what is this? The waist of what? What is the rest? Gold, silver, brass, iron and clay. You saw that. Then here's the interpretation of king. God has given you the kingdom. You are represented by the head of gold. Okay, so these are depictions of kingdoms. So this God rules in the kingdom of men. So he says these are the kingdoms from your time, Nebuchadnezzar, that will follow in this order until I set my kingdom. But before I do that, I'll be ruling here. And then I set my kingdom. The reason I'm going to set my kingdom it is because I've been ruling in this kingdom. Then I bring my kingdom. Because you see, that's the point. You see, the coming of Christ is not just a coming that drops from nowhere with a vacuum. Christ comes because he's in charge right here. And there's evidence. So he says, so God has given you this kingdom. But of course, when we read the prophecy, then we say, Master Guide, after Babylon, then Medo-Persia. After Medo-Persia, then Greece. After Greece, then Rome. After Rome, then the divided nations of the Western Europe, with all those nations bringing us friends and all this European, and he says, we right there in the 10 toes, and Christ will come during the time and the reign of those kingdoms to set up his own kingdom. That's true, but really, honestly, read it again. It doesn't really say that. It may have been written like that, but if you read in between, it really makes sense if you look at it this way. That these kingdoms do not come, but they are brought by God. See, this is the message he says to, at least we understand that from Nebuchadnezzar, that he gives this kingdom to whomsoever he chooses. So he chose Nebuchadnezzar and gave him the kingdom of Babylon. By the way, if you read the book of Jeremiah, there when God talks to Jeremiah and he tells him about the kingdom that's going to come and punish them, he says that kingdom, whose head is Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is my servant. So, what do I do? Because you're not listening to me, I'm going to bring him. If you read chapter 1 of Daniel chapter 1, it says, and God gave Jehoiakim, the king of Israel, into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. God gave. Jehoiakim was not defeated in the battle. Nebuchadnezzar thinks he was defeated, but the Bible says God gave. So God is in charge here. God is in control. Nebuchadnezzar goes and he wins the war. He says, I conquered. God says, no, I gave them to your hand. If God has given you if God has given you Jehoiakim into your hand, and the articles from the temple into your hand, then you must actually be very careful how you deal with that, because God holds you as a steward. This is very important, because with all those things that were in the temple, we'll talk about that on Monday or Tuesday. With all those things that were in the temple, God had given to Nebuchadnezzar. Belshazzar came later on. He drank wine from them. God says, no. Those things were taken from Babylon, from Jerusalem, to be kept here. Safety. Now you're drinking wine. I don't like that. I don't like that. Okay, so he speaks. Mene, take care of farsi. I don't have a problem with your drinking, but don't use my utensils, okay? Because I gave you those so that you can keep them safely. Do you know what happens in Ezra when they were going back to Jerusalem? Ezra says they counted all those utensils that were taken in Jerusalem, and he made sure all of them were counted. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. When these guys were given into the hand of Jehoiakim, Daniel was there also given to the hands. But you see, God cannot protect them. God cannot say you can't drink from them. He will tell them, don't drink. You didn't hear me. All right. So then they're given food to eat and whatever. Then this guy says, we cannot defile ourselves. Just because we're in your hand, sure you think we can do whatever you want us to do? No, we've been given to your hand. But we report to God. God is still in control. So you see then what is happening with Nebuchadnezzar is that Nebuchadnezzar, you must report to God. He gave you the kingdom. When he says break off your sins, because he gave you the kingdom, and then you can now, from there you've got the formula now. So when Belshazzar messed up, God brought who? Cyrus. So he says in Isaiah that I'm going to bring my servant, and he calls him by name, Cyrus. 200 years before Cyrus is born, God has already indicated that he's going to bring Cyrus, his servant. Do you know, the story goes that when the Israelites, the Jews were in Medo-Persia there, and they brought their books and say, Cyrus, here is your name in our scripture. This is, before you were born, your name was written here. There was a purpose for your life. You know what Cyrus does? He says, go back. Because Cyrus could know, Cyrus had enough evidence that he did not conquer Babylon. God conquered. God gave him. So he was acting as a steward. He says, go back to Jerusalem. I'll give you everything. Because this is the reason why God has brought me. So when Belshazzar fails, God judges him. We'll talk about that during the week. God judges him, then he brings somebody else. All right? When these guys also in Medo-Persia fail, God brings somebody else. When they fail in Greece, God brings somebody else. He says, I give the kingdom of him to whomsoever I choose. I choose you, give it to you. I choose you, give it to you. Then he says, later on, I will not give it to anyone. I'll just establish my kingdom, and then I rule it because you guys have failed. So I establish my kingdom, I don't give it to anyone. But how do we know that's going to happen? How do you know that Jesus Christ is going to come? That's a very simple question, because Babylon came. How do you know that Jesus is going to come? Because Medo-Persia came. How do you know that Jesus is coming? Because Greece. This is evidence upon evidence, because Greece came. How do you know? Because Rome came. Read your history, there's evidence. It came before it was. Now, we live at a time where we can see that this has happened. Beloved, this is called scientific thinking. If this is how you do it, you don't need to be a scientist here. If I say to you, when I drop this bottle, if I let go of this bottle, it will be the victim of force of gravity. It will go to the floor, whatever, fall. You say, no, that can't be. That'll be magic. Oops. Oh, so it can happen. Then I say again, do you believe that? You see, I'm using the word belief. Do you believe that if I let this thing go, it will? You say yes, because you've got the evidence. You saw it. But if it happens 4 times it happens, you think it's not going to happen on the 5th time, then you are yes, it happened. Yes, it happened. Yes, it happened. But not this time. No, it can't. Come on. So God says to us now, to Nebuchadnezzar, I've shown you Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, we'll see down in chapter 3 also. But I've shown you, Nebuchadnezzar, that Jesus Christ is going to set up his kingdom. I've shown you that I'm in charge. I've shown you that I've given you the kingdom. Of course, he didn't see what happened, but he knew that his kingdom will come to an end. And somebody else, he knew before he died, he knew exactly. If God can plant a dream, the most difficult thing, what would make it difficult for him to make it sure that it is realized? God rules, not God will rule. Oh, this vacuum thinking, I don't know what that is. Don't ask me. This vacuum thinking, just God just interrupts, just breaks into this age. He just breaks it. But we don't know him. No, he was waiting for you in heaven. He says, I rule here, that's why I will rule there. I rule here, that's why I rule here. And here it is. God must then give us the evidence that he's ruling here so that we can accept that which we hope for, that he will rule tomorrow. I can never accept a God who is failing today and that he will rule tomorrow. I know some of you are saying, we're going to pray for you, Pastor. Go ahead, pray for me. I'm praying for you too. Listen, let me give it to you now. If, we're going to put this one, if, this is a big if there's heaven, I don't care. Personally, I don't care. But what will make me to care is what that heaven means to me here on earth, where I face difficulties. You can't, when I'm going through difficulties, tell me that don't worry, there's heaven. Oh, please, beloved, please don't do that. You're messing with me now. You're messing with me. Don't bring heaven. When I'm suffering, say, there's heaven. Don't worry, just go there. And say, why? Because God, now if God is so powerful, why can't he help me here? In heaven, there's no opposition. In heaven, there's no death. In heaven, there are no thorns. So even if God is not, they will be fine. I need him here. I need God here. And when God makes sense to me here, I can wait for him and say, you know what, in heaven, I want to see that God. Because I walked with him here. You know what the Bible says? It says Enoch. Dived into heaven. No, walked with God. And he disappeared. Heaven begins with a walk. Here, existential relevance. It begins, you walk to heaven. You don't just end. You don't just land in heaven. You walk. So each walk is a heavenly walk. Each walk is evidence that where I'm going is going to be good. How do you know that? I can feel it right here. And then Paul says, then faith is the substance of things hoped for. Beloved, I close and I say, Jesus Christ is coming. And that is more certain than what your plans are for tomorrow. But then Paul says, beloved, if these things are going to dissolve like this, if indeed Jesus Christ is going to come as he is going to come, what manner of people ought you be? And then he says, in John chapter 14, I will come again. You think you can say you're going to come again if there's no proof that you once came? If there's no evidence that you once came, then you come up with the coming again, but where is the first one? We must be able to see the first one. We must be able to say there's the evidence of the first one. We must see it. We must show where was he, the first coming, where was it? We must see it in history. It must be there. Even for those who are not believers, they must see that he was here. They may not know why he was here, but they must see that he was here. Then he can say, I'm going to come again. We can't just come again when you don't even know whether you were here. Guys, I'm coming again. Coming again, you must first be here. And I'm telling you, beloved, the Christ you are waiting for, I'm going to show you tomorrow. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share that with you tomorrow. The Christ you are waiting for is here. And there's evidence. Okay. What if he doesn't come? After all the weeks of prayers that we've attended, missing out on whatever films or movies, he doesn't come. Fundisi, what if he doesn't come? After missing the matches on Sabbath and those who worship on Sunday, and on Sunday, what if he doesn't come? You know what's my answer? Then he doesn't come because you want to know. You won't know. If Christ doesn't come, you won't even complain. Because you'll be dead. Honestly, I mean, why worry about something that will not affect you? If you are dead, like you are dead, now think with me, you are dead. And then you discover that Christ is not coming. I don't know how you will discover that. But I mean, it's like you discover that it's not coming. Or maybe somebody says, no, guys, we're wrong. He's not coming. And we start saying that or whatever. So you're dead. You say, oh, man, I wasted my... You won't know. What if he doesn't come? And the answer is, you want to know. Relax. Then I ask you a question. What if he comes? Because you will know. If he comes, you will know. Because the Bible says there's going to be resurrection. The first resurrection for those who were waiting for you. The second resurrection, you see, that thing of resurrection is to make you to know that it was true. So I ask you and I leave you this question. What if he comes? Come on, guys. You've got to have an answer. You've got to have an answer there. You can't just sit there just I'm crossing my fingers. What if he comes? But I have even something better than that. He's here. And he wants to make your life meaningful. So that you can look forward to his coming. We're going to pray as we close. I'm just going to challenge you here. I know some of you are going through a lot of challenges, small, big, but that's a challenge to you. Difficulties, suffering, whatever, questions that you might have. Do you believe that Jesus Christ is coming? If you do, raise your hand. It's okay if you don't. We still have 6 more days to help you with that. But here's the second one. Have you, okay, let's put this in a prayer form. Would you like to pray to God? This God who has got this beautiful plan, including his coming, the coming of Jesus Christ to save you because he has saved you. Is it your prayer that, Lord, as I live my short life, may I experience what I'm hoping for? May I experience what's in your promise? That there will be peace in heaven. Can you give me peace here on earth? Peace that passes understanding. Can you give me joy, unspeakable joy here on earth? Can you do that? I like a statement by Ellen G. White. And she says, in Desire of Ages, page 323, that chapter that talks about come and I'll give you rest. Commenting on Matthew 11, she says, if Christ dwells in us, I'm paraphrasing, if Christ is in us, if Christ dwells in us, there's nothing that can make us sad if Christ makes us glad by his presence. Now, it says nothing. Cancer, nothing. A loved one, lost a loved one, nothing can make you sad if Jesus makes you glad. There is nothing that you don't have that is powerful than what you have in Christ. There is no absence that can threaten God's presence. Is it your prayer? So, Lord, help me to experience the promise that you have given me in your word. And the Bible says in Hebrews 11, they died by faith. They did not receive the promise. But that part seeks to say, don't get excited just because they didn't receive it. But they saw it. They were assured of it. And they embraced it. And they died. In other words, what they were hoping for, they died embracing it, experiencing it. Is that your prayer this evening? That, Lord, may I experience that. Even though I may be going through difficulties in my marriage, in my relationship with my children, my parents, at work, may I experience that joy that nobody can take because it comes from you. If that's your prayer, I want you to stand and we pray together. Ask God to give you that. Now this one is bigger than just saying we're asking God to give you money, because the devil can give you money also. But this one is bigger than that. This one says, even if I don't have money, let me live a life of joy that even surpasses the one who has money and does not have you. Is that okay? In other words, I want to live a life that does not depend on the material, on those things that we can see. Our kind and loving Father, thank you for your word, for your word is truth, and your word is true. And forgive us not for not reading your word and for not believing what we read. And now we pray as we thank you for the promises you have given us. But our prayer is that those promises can be realized in our lives today. That we can show the evidence of the hope we have to those around us, the reason for our faith. And those of us who are going through difficulties, even as we speak, dear Lord, may they experience that joy that no one can take. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.